good afternoon, good morning, good night. We have so many people who join us from all over the world for this Solutions Series seminar, which is brought to you by IES, Schoolbox and the Eventful Learning Co. We will give you a couple of minutes to just sink in. We will kick off very, very soon. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear where you're joining us from in the chat. We are here, well, when I say we, I know a lot of the Schoolbox team and myself. My name is Summer Howarth and I'm the founder of the Eventful Learning Co. If you are joining us for the first time, we are here in Melbourne, Australia, where it is Tuesday evening at 10 p.m. And it's awesome to have a worldwide audience. This morning, I was fortunate enough to work with over 2,000 young people from mainly across Australia, but also across India, Asia, and South America. They were getting up at all different times or staying up at all different times like we are here. And they were really looking at what might the future hold for them in terms of a career. It's such an exciting time for us to be able to normalize this way of virtually connecting and to really change and shape the way that we come together as education professionals, and also to be bringing others and their story and expertise in to our stories and really co-constructing that future of education as well. So I would love to hear in the chat where you are joining us from and what time of day it is. I'm going to say a quick hello to our Schoolbox team as well. We've got Leah and Grant who join us as always. And today we have Pete, who is coming a little bit further into the conversation as well. Pete, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Summer. How your day sounded like it was quite exciting. 2,000 students.
2,000 students. It was fantastic. We had students from regional Victoria were joining us in the majority, which was great. And anything from a student who was sitting in their study, zooming in like this. We also had a school that had over 300 students in their Year 10 cohort joining us all together as well. So a very, very exciting day. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without platforms and technology. And let's face it, we're able to turn something that was a bit negative nearly 12 months to the day ago into something pretty positive.
Absolutely.
Pretty nice. Now, talking about regional Victoria, we also have Andy Edwards, who I'll introduce these two in more detail around their expertise, but I'll start off with a bit of a chat. Andy is joining us in one of my favourite regional centres, Ballarat. How are you today, Andy?
Good evening from Ballarat. Yes, I am very good, thank you. Yes, I'm in Ballarat, so I'm glad it's one of your favourite regional places. It's a great place to be.
I was in Ballarat on the weekend, and it is becoming very known for its food and wine, its local produce. So when those borders do open up, and many of you who are joining us from across Asia, do make sure that you check out our regional cities and give them a little bit of love as well. We need to build up those small cities as well. All right, I'm going to kick right into this. So today is all about individualization. We think it's a key design principle when we are looking at the future of schooling, education and learning. These sorts of things go hand in hand and they're not to be lumped all in the same category. What we're doing here is thinking about a big chunky question. How might we design certainty into an uncertain world? So even as we move forward now, thinking about our experiences of 2020, it's all about what do we want to kind of bring with us? What do we want to begin to do? And of course, what are we going to put in the bin? So they're my kind of favorite organizers there when we're thinking along these lines. And so it's a key time for us to think about how we actually individualize or personalize some of these learning experiences, and some great lessons from all sorts of schools and organizations today. So one of the key challenges here that we noted last week from our friends at the Relationship Project was how we're able to kind of look at the way that societies and civic groups were thinking and acting around policy and behavior prior to 2020. You know, we went from this particularly standardized delivery, and it might be of healthcare systems, education systems, service provisions like photography, for example, Andy, which we'll dive a little deeper into soon. Definitely moving more across into personalised. So we really wanted to dive a lot deeper into that particular variable today. thinking about not only what's possible, but in fact, it seems as though the initial research is telling us that people are demanding it, which will include our young people in schools, will include our staff in schools. Of course, it will include our parents and our future customers as well. And I think that there's a lot here. If we're talking about this as some blanket research, it's a really nice, timely thing for us to be bringing in voices from other industry so that we can learn and say, that's what's happening over there. I'm seeing some parallels here in education organisations or in fact schools as well. So today we're actually switching around here. We're looking at story and then solution because Pete is part of our conversation here. And I know there's a few things that he's been working on alongside the Schoolbox crew, which we always want to look at, all right, well, this is all great, Summer, if we have a chat about this, but what's the solution that I can pick up now? And there's quite a few, but it's nice for Pete to be able to share some of those with us. And of course, our skill, it's our third canvas. Today, we are looking at how we conduct a root cause analysis. If we're looking at some behavior change, or again, thinking about how we can start to get into the hearts and minds and hands as we did last week with our persona canvas, how can we now look at a problem and then think about all of the consequences of that problem, but importantly, what are the causes of it still existing? All right, so just a tiny bit of housekeeping here. Please use that Q&A to ask panelists questions. The chat function, you can also chat amongst yourselves. I know that some of you are starting to make some great connections there, so please keep that up. And of course, our Miro Board, which is our collaborative platform to add in our inputs and our ideas and our expertise and experience. And it's been awesome to see that flourish as well. Grant, I know that you're going to pop that into the chat for us to make sure that we are able to see that Miro Board and get started. As always, as we have a look at some of our stories here and immerse into a little bit of a chat for around 20 minutes or so, I've asked a big question on that Miro Board around what does individualization look like in your context? So you might find yourself thinking about this from a classroom. Maybe you're thinking about this as a principal, and so your context might be in terms of leadership there. Perhaps you're like Andy and you're joining us from an outside of education organisation. We're really interested to know, what does it look like, sound like, and feel like for you? What are some of those tangible examples of individualization that perhaps the rest of this collective genius of folks might be able to tap into? All right, so our leading voices today, we've got Andy. Now, Andy, to give you a little bit of context, I've talked around him. Now I'm going to introduce you directly to him. He's the founder and CEO of GeoSnapShot. He's got a really interesting business model that he's very much leveraged those opportunities that came out of 2020, and something that he's not going to go back to business as usual, because this individualization and this personalized approach has been incredibly pivotal to how he does things. And we're going to learn a little bit more about Andy as well. He is an experienced global executive, and he is really heads up in that media and technology space. So keep those questions flowing for Andy as well. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you very much, Summer. Great to be here, and thanks to IES for hosting this wonderful webinar for everybody. So hopefully I can be of assistance to some people through it, and I really look forward to the questions.
Awesome. Pete, it's awesome to have you with us as well. He is the commercial manager for Queensland Asia at Schoolbox. And I know many of you have worked with Pete and had that joy of a great, robust conversation around what learning and teaching looks like, sounds like, and feels like, and importantly, what it could be. I love how Pete really lets himself be in this split screen space around the realities and how we can really solve problems now, and also thinking about the potential of what we might be able to do if we got clever people together. He is an educator and e-learning leader. Pete, it is awesome to have you in this conversation.
Thanks, Summer. It's really exciting to be here for this this third instalment of what's been a great series thus far, and it's great to have Andy alongside us.
Nice. And you're also stuck with me as a leading voice today, but something that I'm going to bring into this conversation is my own experience in running the Eventful Learning Company. It's always fun in a year of lockdown to have called your business Eventful. So you can see that the core of my business was in events prior, but I have a long history in learning-based experiences and had some really great examples that I even shared earlier today with Teaching and Learning, Digital Teaching and Learning Victoria in personalising, particularly for our middle school students. So I do a lot of strategy as well. All right, let's look to kick this off. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I'm able to see some of those questions coming through, and I might kick over to the Miro. But Andy, I'm going to share something with everybody at the moment, and that's that you are actually cycling across Australia at the moment. I mean, it feels like it's across Australia. Anything more than up the street for me is a very, very long distance. So this is something that you are doing for a dare, for fun, for fundraising. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's you know, I think it's something that I really enjoy. I really enjoy traveling. I really enjoy the experiences. I really enjoy traveling, challenging myself, and everything that comes with that. I think when you spend a little bit of time alone, seemingly doing some crazy things, you know, you actually have some wonderful experiences. And it comes back, Summer, to what you were saying earlier on about visiting rural Australia, some of the wonderful towns that we have, some of the wonderful historic centres, and I've been travelling through those small towns and historic centres at a very slow pace for the last 4 or 5 days now. I'm covering about 100 kilometres a day, just over, obviously varying weather and temperatures. But yeah, I really enjoy the experience. It's not a dare. It's not necessarily for fundraising. It's really, I guess it's fun, right? So yeah, and nearly there. So probably another day, a day and a bit to go until I get into Melbourne. So yeah.
Nice. So this feels like, when we're talking about individualization, this is clearly a challenge that you have taken on yourself. It's something that you have tailor-made as a personal experience. Why is it important that you have had the autonomy over this particular experience that you are going through at the moment?
I mean, you know, we all travel through life having our own experiences. Although we might be in a group of people, in a school, for example, or in a learning or education centre, each one of our experiences that we take from that is individual. You know, I can pass other bike riders along the way, or I can see people that might be walking the same route. In fact, I saw one of those along the way. And every experience that you have is individual. And you know, GeoSnapShot is really about those things. It's about capturing life's memories for us in photos and videos that are your personal situations in life, your personal journeys, your personal experiences. So the cycle trip is just you know, I guess an exaggerated version of an individual point in time. And yeah, it's very much a personal journey. You know, I've done Melbourne to Sydney, I've done the whole of the UK, as various other experiences, and I find them very rewarding. And I find sharing them with people very interesting as well. Some people it appeals to, some people, yeah, just don't see that at all. But they're all my personal experiences. So yeah, I enjoy them.
So you put something out there then, that GeoSnapShot, which is your company, it's no surprise that your sort of individual experiences and the way that you live your life filters into your business as well. And yes, all puns intended. I know you're a photographer, so filters into your life. Tell me a little bit about what GeoSnapShot does, because I'm really keen with Pete for us to be able to draw that bow around what that might mean for a future of schooling, get into a bit of a robust chat there. Tell us about GeoSnapShot.
So all these things, I think, start with a very big vision. And my vision was quite simple, but quite large. I really believe that anybody on the planet is capable of capturing a memory of somebody else's life, which is important to them. So we all carry cameras with us. We're all at events. We're all doing things. And lots of people are capturing those memories of your life, of moments of your life, which is important. But more often than not, those memories get lost. We don't know where they are. They could be on somebody's Facebook group. They could be on, you know, a website somewhere. They're just lost, right? And it was really bringing some structure and control around that. Safety and security of people's photos is really important, obviously, but bringing some structure around how can we get community, supporting community, to enable these memories of people's lives to be available. So GeoSnapShot is really about capturing those memories. We started, and we have a large area of our business in sports, from children's sports right the way through to global brands such as Tough Mudder that have events all around the world, and into many schools now as well.
It's interesting you say around that sort of capturing different experiences. My dad recently did an amazing fitness feat, a little bit like what you're undertaking here. And one of the great sort of prizes at the end for him was that somebody was there to capture moments when, you know, essentially no one else could see. He was, you know, like Tough Mudder, running through the bushes and doing all sorts of crazy things. He said it's like that was the biggest prize, that somebody had captured that so he can look back and reminisce on that. And so it was even deeper in this individual experience. It became something that was quite personalized and almost, you know, frozen in time, almost like a legacy, if you will.
I mean, if you think about the things that are important, you know, in our lives, they are, you know, probably in order: our loved ones, our family, our pets, our dogs, our things like that, and the memories, you know, the photos that we have of our lives are so important to us. And, you know, to look back and reminisce and things like that. The worst situation is that those aren't available to us. And what we find is that through sporting events, you know, if we take that and we'll move on to schools, but if you look at sporting events, that really only the top 2% of sporting events globally are covered by photographers. But a goal that I might have scored, you know, in a five-a-side soccer match, or you know, a netball game that's being played by, you know, an 8-year-old daughter is just as important a memory as finishing that Ironman, for example.
It's timely, I think, we bring Pete into this conversation, because as we're really talking about this idea of capturing moments in time, is how we start to individualize that experience that you're saying, that kind of progressions, the celebration, the moments in time. Pete, you've been in education for a really long time and seen all sorts of ways in which we can really push students along. At what point do you think it's about capturing the learning, and how might we do that to really get in this pursuit of individualization in the school context?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and I think the landscape is changing under our feet, you know, as we speak. We really like the notion that, say, Andy and his organisation have this sort of individualised approach, and so, you know, within a school's context, we understand there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in the classroom in really rapid speed that you know, students are learning, and teachers need to be able to see and capture that learning and allow students to be able to capture that learning themselves and share it with the teacher or a parent, and have a way to visualize that in a really neat and concise way that's, you know, nice and centralized, and you know, and is very much just about the child and what they're doing. And, you know, the traditional model of student, you know, submits work to a teacher, and a teacher, you know, gives some feedback on it and, you know, marks it. That has its place, but what we're seeing right now is that when you have a home learning model, or you have children working in other ways and learning in other ways. I know my own kids, for instance, when we went into home learning, there was a lot of learning I was seeing that wasn't what I would consider formal learning. And the ability to be able to capture that and have them capture it and share that back to their own teacher is really rich. And so unlocking ways to do that, I think, is really, really important. And I think it's a sort of a bit of a Kodak moment. You use some puns, I'm going to use some here with you. I think it's a Kodak moment for schools to be able to find other ways to quantify and allow students to show what they know and can do in a really simple way.
It's interesting you talk about that that Kodak moment, because I'm guessing you're saying not only capturing, but actually that idea of we need to be thinking we're less in the, you know, business of teaching and more in the business of learning. So Kodak thought, actually, we're not in the photographic business, we're in the memory making business. Yep. Maybe their business model may have been different. Now, it might just be a time for me to direct folks to that Miro, because I think what Pete's really given us a core catalyst for is that driving question around what does individualization look like in your context. I'm interested in how are you capturing learning? How are you capturing those moments of learning that, as Pete said, might not be formal? Because I guess where Andy and Pete have really hit on a sweet spot here is when we do individualize something, quite often it's actually looking at by design, so with intentionality, but without formalizing things. So yep. Andy's not talking about sitting in rows and capturing a photograph or posing with the soccer ball there. Pete's not talking about how we can just do an assessment with a rubric and hand it in. It's almost sort of the magic parts that go unnoticed in between. The demand now is that we notice those and capture those. Am I capturing the essence of that right, Pete?
100%, absolutely.
Yeah, nice. So I'm wondering here then, and Pete, I'll stick with you for a second before kicking back over to Andy. There's a risk then, isn't there, that this individualization of schooling, learning, and indeed, Andy, everything in a service provision way, from, you know, groceries to photographs to social media, I mean, yep. to anything there. Is there a threat that this can become incredibly demanding? And what are the demands on organisations around this? I know we've got a lot of principals here that would be thinking, all right, well, what's my service offering? And in fact, are my resources going to blow out here? What do you think there are some of the demanding or potentials of demand there, Pete?
Well, I've always been a strong advocate in my own practice when I was an educator for universal design for learning practices. And for those that are joining us tonight that don't know what UDL is, I would encourage you to look up what UDL is. But effectively, it's, you know, it's a process that can be best described with, if I was to walk into a building and there was a flight of stairs and there was a ramp, which of those two things don't I need? And so if I design the building with the view that I only need the ramp because everyone can get into the building, then I don't need this sort of cumbersome approach, or this sort of added on approach of having to build a flight of stairs. And if I apply that to learning, is to say that if I look at every child in my class and I can meet the individual needs of children in my class that require multiple means of representation, so they might need text, but audio and video as well, then that doesn't just support that student, but it supports every child in the room. And if you design in that way initially, you're then not applying this sort of added on approach. And I think that's where education is really at the moment, is to say, well, you know, we already do this, but what we actually now should be doing is applying it ubiquitously in every classroom, in every learning opportunity, and in every, you know, connection and community opportunity within the school. And those principles I hold, you know, personally very dear.
I think you've given us an excellent example, Pete. And what you're really saying is, if we have this idea of individualization by design, we're building accessibility and almost raising the benchmark of what we're doing too there. Andy, I want to kick over to you with that thought around, you know, Pete knows what's going on in schools. Pete's got his eyes and ears to the ground there. They're really looking at ways to make things incredibly visible and accessible. And it's certainly a solution that Schoolbox offers, that we're able to get in there and make sure that pieces of work or learning progressions, you know, or the activities of learning are incredibly clear and transparent for all of those involved in education of that child. Now, again, I go back to this idea from someone that sits out of education. What are people demanding in terms of this individualization? Because if they're demanding it from you, they're going to demand it from schools, right?
Well, that's right. And it's a fascinating topic, I think. You know, we've had some great learnings from talking to schools that have been using GeoSnapShot, talking to Schoolbox about the absolute demands of schools holistically, what they want to achieve. So, schools themselves really do want to personalize the students' progression through schools. They don't want the overhead that you talked about. They do want to be able to call out individual students as they go through certain progressions of schools, but they also want to provide a journey of that student through schools for the student themselves, but also for the parent or carer of that student. So it's a complex thing, and I think previously what we've seen with, say, photography at schools is maybe once, twice, 3 times a year, a professional comes in and everyone sits in a line, as you say, and takes photos. And that's not very personal, and it's not the journey that's seen week on week, and it's not necessarily what the student or the parent or carer wants. So with GeoSnapShot, what we learned from listening to the schools and working with Schoolbox was we need certain features in place to look after the security and privacy of students' photos. So we have to have those, right? So, but we also want the school to be able to choose volunteer photographers, the students themselves, maybe parents in some circumstances, right the way through to professionals, to take photos throughout the year, so that when you finished your soccer match, you can have some photos of that, or at the end of the year, you can look back in a yearbook and really see, wow, that was the progression that I had. Those are my personal achievements as a student at that school throughout the year.
I love that idea of this is more than a photograph. It's a capture of achievement. And that is where we're starting to talk about the same things. The demand is on, I want to know what I'm doing now. I want that visible so that I can make my next progression as well. I talked to you, Andy, about the great ALL lecture, the Australian Learning lecture from a few years ago, where Michael Barber talked about joy and data. And when he used to ride a bike for fun, much like somebody we know in this call, but somebody gave him a Garmin, and then all of a sudden he started to have a lot of his own data. And in fact, he then was that was the capture in time, and he was compelled to do something with the data. He got very interested in his own progressions. So I think that that's where the core of this conversation is. Individualization is very much around capturing progression. It's around accessibility. And in fact, it's around looking at the things that we often haven't captured before. So it does become this idea of, when we're looking in a school context, what might we be able to offer that is incredibly data rich, that builds the capability of those who are around to take a little bit more agency back. And of course, how it can be accessible anytime, anywhere. I have no doubt that technologies, augmented reality technologies, artificial intelligence technologies will start to really push and accelerate this individualized sort of pathway there. So a quick question before I kick over into our skill, and I'd love for you both to join us there. Andy, I'll stick with you and I'll give Pete the last word, and he might have a few bits that he'd like to point to in Schoolbox as well. You've noted that GeoSnapShot has that relationship with Schoolbox already. The individual experience, once nice, now necessary?
Yeah, look, very necessary. So if you think about what schools try and do, is they are trying to personalize, as we said earlier on. One of the key things that GeoSnapShot offers is face recognition software. So the school, either from a marketing perspective or publications perspective, can put a photo of a certain student into the system, and it's all privacy and secured, of course, and people can ask us more about that offline. but they can put a certain photo in and have all the photos shown of that particular student at the school. So it's easy for the publications area to kind of go, you know, an alumni or little Johnny's done some great stuff. Look at his progression through soccer, for example. It's really easy for them to do that. But that enables us to do two things. It enables us to be privacy for the parents. So you only see the photos of your child that has been uploaded. And we can also remove photos of children that can't be photographed at school. So it offers a whole range of great benefits for the school, the parent themselves, and also the memories of the students as they come through life. So yeah, I mean, all of these things are amazing, and they're available to the school, built into their software services, be that their website or their learning management systems that they use, and they can be used every weekend at school. They're that simple to use. So yeah, we're really encouraging people to really dive into it and use it as the personal journey for every student at the school every weekend.
It certainly sounds, Pete, to me, I know both of us were in that sort of executive in schools, the efficiencies around individualization. When you think of it, when you come to it, even at the beginning of this conversation, you think more time, more resources, it's going to take a lot more energy. But in fact, I think through looking at it through the eyes of Andy, and certainly knowing what technology is out there enabling this sort of thing, it's bringing those efficiencies in. So Pete, I will ask you the same question. Personalising and individualisation in schools, and we know that it's not just for learning, but it can be for career pathways and all sorts of things, for school photos, all of the things. Once nice, now necessary?
I think it's always been necessary. And the reason why I believe that is because one of the greatest assets that schools have is the students and the agency of the child, and every individual child, and being able to unlock that, I think, and allowing autonomy in the learning, I think it equals responsibility, which is very personalised. And for me, that equals opportunities for growth. And I think that, whether it be through, customised participation in course-driven learning, or whether it's a blended approach, or whether it's, the opportunity to sort of be able to work on assessment in different kinds of ways that are separate from other students. I think all of these things have always been necessary, and we're really now just tapping into how we do that in a way that we've always done, but only for a handful of students. And I think home learning has really opened our eyes to everyone at that point had a very personal experience, because we all lived it. It was all different in our own homes. I know you experienced it. I experienced it. Andy, you as business owner, you experienced it. It was very personal at that point. So the necessity has always been there. And as an organisation that supports teaching and learning in schools, but also, as Andy said, this personal journey that is not just about learning, because really, what is learning? It's not just the academics and the grades and these. It's learning happens all of the time. It's what do we value in that learning, and I think this is a really exciting time, so that tools like GeoSnapShot are going to be able to visualize in platforms like ourselves and on websites and the like, that personalized experience, like what it actually looks like. And I guess if parents aren't able to be on site at the moment taking photographs, or and they're relying upon the schools to do so, then it allows them to be hands off and to say, hey, we understand you've got this. It's
another service, isn't it, to the parents themselves, actually, that benefits the parents, benefits the students, and benefits the school, right? So, I think it's really important to realise that the restrictions on parents these days of taking photos at school is getting, more and more. I mean, we're having to put restrictions in place, but of course, everybody wants their memories from their school time. I mean, people look back years later and reminisce about the people that they knew and the sports that they did and the amateur dramatics that they were in. And I think it's massively important that we hold that history of the school, and we hold the history of our students as we go through that, without putting additional pressures, on parents and the school itself. So I fully agree.
Well, let's kick into contextualizing this a little bit more as we really have a look at now thinking about our skill, because I think Andy and Pete, what you've brought up there is there's all sorts of, I guess, ways that schools and different leaders and organizations can look at this. And when we're going then through a change process, I mean, it doesn't just happen that everybody catches on to this. We know that there's often an adoption curve. We want to deeply understand what our school needs are and how we might be able to design, as Pete said, some more individualization in. So this is the root cause tree. It is an analysis process, and it identifies a problem and leads us to a pathway of solutions. It doesn't give us the solutions, it gives us the aha moments on the way to them. So when managing change, a root cause analysis is something that will show you the difference between what is the vision that you have and what is the current reality, and it helps you move a little bit closer there. So this is one of my favorites that I do with all sorts of clients here, school-based and not. As you know, I always give you 5 key elements, and my 5 key elements for the root cause tree are: identify the problem, ask, and then when you're thinking about your consequences of that problem. They're kind of your branches of your tree there. If you think about it, we only usually prune those branches of the tree, and then of course they come back more robust. We want to actually dig down, and in order to kill this awful tree, it's not a beautiful tree, it's a big noxious tree, we want to be able to kill off those roots so that the trunk no longer is stable and the tree falls over. So therefore what we're saying there is the best way to solve a problem is to understand the causes of the problem, not the consequences. So we ask, but why, but why, but why? Like a petulant child, we do that of our root causes. We identify a clear root cause there. So we really want to understand, and then we develop a question around it. And this is what it looks like, or this is my take on a root cause tree. So what I like to do is put the problem at the trunk of the tree. We then look at the consequences that flourish from that problem. And then, of course, the causes that keep that tree growing. So what I'm going to do now is to switch over and have a look at our Miro board. So Andy, Pete, Schoolbox crew as well, I'd love it if you can join me over here in the Miro. Now, just to quickly check in, I've asked about individualization and what does it look like? It looks like the context and creating experiences that are contextual. It looks like accessibility. It looks like ways to get parents to continuing with the learning, which is awesome. We've got videos in there, tailoring approach. The more and more examples that we can get in there, and I know between us doing this live and those tuning in, we get more and more examples each week in this emerging and growing Miro board. So what we're going to do is have a little bit of a go for 5 minutes of doing this together. I have put a wicked problem at the trunk of this tree, and what we do is we assume that this is a blanket problem for everybody. We don't want to defend the problem here. We just want to say, "Oop, that's a problem." So the worst thing we can do now is go, "Oh yeah, but sometimes, but actually," we say, "No, if it's at all a slight bit of a problem, let's over exaggerate it and let's say it's a problem for everyone." So here, the problem is that school is one size fits all. So what we will do is grab some Post-it notes. We know how to do that with our sticky notes over here. We can grab whichever color we want. And what I would love is if we put as many consequences as we possibly can. So we ask, well, and then what happens? So for example, the problem is that school is one size fits all. And then what happens? Some students get really bored. And then what happens? Parents don't feel like they're getting value for money. And then what happens? Enrollments decrease. And then what happens? Well, maybe we have to downsize our resources available to the school. And then what happens? Well, maybe we have some school closures. And then what happens? I mean, we can go to the downfall of society with our consequences, but it's really great for us to be thinking about these consequences because here is the reality. When you go into a leadership meeting or a meeting with teams, maybe a meeting with parents here, perhaps you even have to pitch to minister or somebody who's an authorizing environment. If you go in here with your solution or an idea, someone's going to have their branch. Somebody is going to say, well, look, yes, there is a problem that school is one size fits all, but what we really have to focus on is student engagement. And with the power and tool of a root cause tree, you're able to say, I completely agree with you. In fact, if we were able to individualize the school experience through our extracurricular activities, maybe even get Andy and his business involved, then I think that students would understand their place here at the school, and they would see that it's not one size fits all, and that they would be more engaged here. And you can quickly see, your branch actually goes to solve my problem. So it is important for us to get as many of those consequences out as we can. Pete, what do you think is a consequence to this problem?
I think that we miss unique and divergent ideas and opportunities to understand, from students that have those, what some would consider wacky ideas. If we didn't have, wacky ideas and everything was vanilla, we wouldn't have innovation in the way that we have it. No one would have gone to the moon. No one would have challenged the sort of, the status quo. And so I think that's, for me, the most important thing.
Nice. I'm going to get you to hold on to that as well, because sometimes a consequence is a cause as well. All right, so some of the things I'm going to scroll in here, we've got students dropping out of school. And if students drop out of school, maybe they might get into a life of crime. They end up in jail. Terrible things happen in jail. And so if we don't individualize learning for students, students will end up in some bad consequences in the criminal system. I mean, it's a long bow to draw, but you can have a little bit of I suppose, fun there, really trying to look at this from all sorts of perspectives. So another key tip here is when I'm looking at consequences at these three circles, sometimes I might have one if I'm looking in a school context. I might have consequences for students, I might have consequences for parents, and I might have consequences for teachers. So I might look at this in a few different ways for a few different perspectives or stakeholders. But as I said to you, it's great to look at the consequences, and you could go all day on this. But what's really hard is when we start to move down into our root causes. So again, I'll model this for you. The problem is that school is one size fits all. And I will say, why? And why? Because we basically have lots and lots of students, and we haven't factored in things into our timetable. So maybe the timetable is a root cause. The problem is that school is one size fits all. Why? Because we're trying to deliver something that is familiar to our parents. We don't want to rock the boat too much. Why else might school be one size fits all, Pete?
I think because it's easy.
Yep.
Or at the very least, it seems easier.
Seems easier. I think that's a really great point to put.
And when you say that it seems easier, it's that you're not considering what the real challenges and therefore opportunities of it are. And you rightly said one. So timetable structures is a clear one. That one has a massive consequence in terms of when learning can happen. What we've been discussing tonight is that, and Andy's brought it up, is that these moments happen all of the time, not just between, standard certain hours. So, that's always a problem.
Yep. Nice. I've put in there, a key problem, and it seems simple, but of course it's complex, is it's one size fits all because we don't know any other way to do it. So that's kind of something interesting. Let's have a look. We might have a simple unwillingness to change. I asked both Pete and Andy around the demands. Perhaps there's a demand for the status quo. That might be something interesting. And often that whole idea of we can't be something if we can't see it either. So to have that kind of proof of concept. And another interesting problem that I often face in some of our high performing schools is that there's not really a need to do things differently. Perhaps we're getting results within the system. We're getting good marks. And while that is something that we value, or we don't have another metric or another way of measuring, it becomes something that we then say, well, there's not really a need to innovate. So when I looked at my 5 key aspects of this skill, what I might even end up going and doing is saying, aha, this is quite interesting here. We might say, let's follow that. And we could say, aha, we don't know how to individualize. You'll know that you've hit on a root cause worth solving if you have an aha moment. So we might pursue this and create a question around it. So for example, and this is just on the fly as a shot in the dark, because you never know what you're going to get with a bunch of clever educators, I might say, in order to solve the problem that school is one size fits all, I might say, how might we equip our teachers to understand processes of individualizing so that students are more engaged in their learning? You know, I'm really looking at a question, then I'm turning it from a problem statement into something we can go ahead and solve. So that, my friends, is my third concept there on how we might actually go from a story here into building our own solutions through a skill. So with a couple of minutes to go, I'm keen to just sort of wrap up on our fantastic series here. It's been a 3-week series, and we'd absolutely love to hear from you if this has been something that you have enjoyed in terms of that skill building, in terms of some of those stories and getting to understand what our friends at Schoolbox can offer a little bit more as well. We've looked at adaptability and really thinking about some of those lessons, particularly from 2020, that we can bring across here, how we might become more agile, adaptive and responsive. And there was a lot of discussion around well-being there as well. We gave a good shout out and a good cheers to some of those unsung heroes in our schools, including enrollments and the marketing team as well. We looked at connection and how, again, it's so important to foster those relationships within our schools and our organizations so that we might have, again, those personalized relationships. And of course, that also adds into our well-being as well. We talked a lot about the parent portal being something that's an incredible tool for us to use. And we explored a persona canvas. Now, first, I should mention, we looked at what we called our pre-mortem, how we might look at utilizing that canvas and that skill to anticipate where failure might creep in and how we can mitigate that. And of course, today we've finished off with looking at that personalization and individualization, and it's all come around how we can capture the stuff, the essence that makes our schools unique, and how we can look at a value proposition there. So there are 3 main big design principles: adaptability, connection, and individualization. We are incredibly grateful that you have joined us either live or watching beyond. My name is Summer Howarth, and I would love it if you continued to connect with me over the socials or through your friends at Schoolbox and IES. You are more than welcome to connect with any of us on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much to the Schoolbox team. Thank you to our leading voices today, Peter and Andy. Thank you to Leah, Grant, and the team. And I'm just wondering, Grant, is there anything that you would like to close off with on behalf of IES and Schoolbox?
Not really, just really appreciate everyone's involvement and contribution to the Miro board. We're getting a lot of traffic through the on-demand consuming of these sessions. We just ask you to reach out to connect with us in a meaningful way, and we really want to assist in paving the way for the future of education. Again, the future of education, because it looks different again. But just want to thank you, Pete, and Andy, thank you. But Summer, you've been an amazing supporter of our programs together. You're an amazing lady, and we really appreciate your involvement in this. Thank you again.
I tell you, anybody who is working on making teaching and learning better for students, for teachers, and for parents absolutely has my support. So thank you all for the job that you do every single day, and I'm sure that you'll be seeing us online again in the future. Thanks, everyone.